The desperate plea. The council chamber floated in the void between stars, a neutral ground where no single species held advantage over another. Commander Vareth of the Zilene stood before the assembled representatives, her silver scales dimmed with exhaustion. She had not slept in 4 planetary rotations. There was no time for sleep anymore. There was barely time for survival. The holographic display behind her showed the latest reports, and every delegate in the chamber knew what those red zones meant. 17 systems had gone dark in the last month alone. Not conquered. Not occupied. Simply gone. Every planet stripped to bedrock. Every station reduced to scattered atoms. Every living thing consumed and converted into more Kranathi. Varetha's voice carried across the silent chamber. She spoke in the common tongue, though her words felt inadequate for the horror she was describing. The Kranathi swarm had appeared from the galactic rim 3 years ago. At first, the coalition had not been concerned. The galaxy was vast, and unknown species emerged from unexplored regions regularly. The standard protocol was observation, then contact, then integration into the galactic community. But the Kranathi did not want integration. They did not want trade or diplomacy or knowledge. They wanted only to feed. They were a parasitic collective, billions of individual organisms linked by a single consuming intelligence. They traveled through space in living ships, great pulsing masses of biological matter that could survive in the vacuum. When they found a world with life, they descended like a plague. Within days, nothing remained but barren rock. The coalition had tried to fight. Oh, how they had tried. The Torvalian Empire had sent their Grand Armada, 300,000 ships carrying weapons that could shatter moons. The Kranathi had met them in open space and the battle had lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Torvalian fleet was gone. Not defeated and retreating. Gone. The Kranathi had absorbed every ship, every weapon, every crew member, and had grown stronger from the meal. The Pelthran Confederacy had attempted a different approach. Their scientists were the finest in the known galaxy. They had developed a biological weapon, a virus designed specifically to target Kranathi cellular structure. They had deployed it on an infected world, feeling certain of success. The Kranathi had adapted to the virus in 17 minutes. Then they had traced the weapon back to its source and consumed the Pelthran research stations. 14,000 of the galaxy's brightest minds had been turned into raw material for the swarm. Varetha's own people, the Zilene, had lost their homeworld 38 days ago. She had been commanding a patrol frigate on the outer system when the Kranathi arrived. She had watched from a distance as the swarm enveloped her world. She had listened to the screams on every communication channel as billions of her people died. She had witnessed the planet itself being stripped away, layer by layer, until nothing remained but a dead core floating in space. She had survived because she had followed orders. When the Kranathi arrived, the Zilene High Command had issued one final directive. Run. Do not fight. Do not try to save anyone. Just run and warn the others. Vareth had run, and she hated herself for it every moment since. Now she stood before the Coalition Council, presenting their final options. She had prepared her report carefully, reviewing every possibility, every strategy, every desperate gambit they might attempt. The conclusion was always the same. They were going to lose. It was not a question of if, but when. Elder Morn of the Torvalians spoke first. He was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species. His body was hunched with age, his eyes clouded with grief for his lost armada. He asked the question that everyone in the chamber was thinking. Is there truly nothing we can do? Are we simply to wait for extinction? Vareth felt the weight of that question. She had asked herself the same thing countless times. The Kranathi were not just winning. They were accelerating. Every system they consumed made them stronger. Every species they absorbed added new capabilities to their collective. At their current rate of expansion, they would reach the Coalition core worlds within 2 years. The entire galactic community would be gone within 5. There was silence in the chamber. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their designated sections, and Vareth could see the same expression on every face, regardless of how many eyes or limbs they possessed. Fear. Pure, undiluted fear. Then Ambassador Calric of the Ven spoke. His species were traders and information brokers, neutral parties who dealt with everyone and maintained vast databases of galactic knowledge. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, as if he was afraid of what he was about to suggest. There is one option we have not discussed. The chamber's attention focused on him immediately. Calric seemed to shrink under that collective gaze, but he continued. We could contact the humans. The reaction was instantaneous. Half the delegates began shouting at once. Some were outraged at the suggestion. Others laughed bitterly. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Vareth felt her own scales ripple with an emotion she could not quite name. Oh, terror? Perhaps both. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the humans, though few had ever seen one. They were a young species, barely 5 centuries into space travel when they had made first contact with the Coalition 150 years ago. The initial meetings had been positive. Humans were curious, energetic, and eager to learn. They had seemed harmless, even charming in their enthusiasm. Then the incident had happened. A rogue Mekler warlord named Thras had decided that humans would make excellent slaves. Their worlds were rich in resources, and the humans themselves seemed weak, lacking the natural weapons or armor that many species possessed. Thras had taken his fleet to a human colony world called Haven and had issued an ultimatum. Submit or be destroyed. The humans had not submitted. But they had not fought either. Not at first. They had simply asked Thras to leave. When he refused and began his attack, destroying a civilian orbital station to prove his seriousness, the humans had gone silent. For 6 days there was no response from human space. No communications. No fleet movements. Nothing. On the 7th day, Thras and his entire armada vanished. 2,000 ships and nearly 1 million Mekler warriors simply ceased to exist. No wreckage was ever found. No distress signals were received. They were just gone. And then the humans had sent a message to the Coalition. It was brief and polite, but the meaning was clear. We wish to be left alone. We will maintain our borders and respect yours. But any further aggression toward our people will be met with permanent consequences. The Coalition had agreed immediately. A quarantine zone was established around human territory. No ships entered. No communication was attempted beyond basic diplomatic necessities. For 150 years, humanity had been isolated, a mystery wrapped in silence. Rumors spread, of course. Some said the humans had developed weapons beyond galactic understanding. Others claimed they had made contact with ancient powers from before the current galactic cycle. A few whispered that humans were not what they seemed at all, that they were something older and darker wearing a friendly face. Elder Morn's voice cut through the chaos in the chamber. Even if we wanted to contact them, why would they help us? They made it clear they want no part of galactic affairs. Kelric pulled up a star map on the main display. Red zones marked Krenathi-consumed territory. Blue marked the Coalition. And there, on the edge of the map, was a yellow zone marking human space. He highlighted the trajectory of the Krenathi advance. In 18 months, the swarm will reach human borders. They cannot hide from this threat. It will come for them whether they want involvement or not. The debate lasted for hours. Arguments flew back and forth across the chamber. Some delegates insisted it was too dangerous, that asking the humans for help might bring a threat worse than the Krenathi. Others argued that they had no choice, that any chance of survival was worth taking. A few suggested that perhaps the humans would not be as powerful as the legends claimed, that the incident with Thras might have been exaggerated over the decades. Vareth listened to it all, but she was thinking of her homeworld. She was thinking of the billions of voices that had gone silent. She was thinking that extinction was not hypothetical for her. It was personal. When the vote was finally called, she cast hers without hesitation. The decision passed by a narrow margin. A message would be sent to human space. It was crafted carefully, reviewed by the Coalition's best diplomats. They explained the situation. They described the Krenathi threat. They acknowledged humanity's desire for isolation but pointed out that this threat would eventually reach them too. They asked as humbly as they could for help. The message was sent to the edge of the quarantine zone, to the automated relay stations that humanity maintained for emergency contact. Then the Coalition waited. Days passed with no response. The Krenathi continued their advance, consuming 2 more systems while the message sat unanswered. Some delegates began to say that the humans were ignoring them, that they would face the Krenathi alone. Then on the 9th day a response arrived. It was not what anyone expected. There were no diplomatic phrases, no expressions of sympathy or solidarity. The message contained only 3 elements. First, a set of spatial coordinates in the Andera expanse. Second, a timestamp exactly 48 hours in the future. Third, a brief instruction: clear all vessels and stations from the designated zone. Anything remaining will be considered hostile. That was all. No explanation. No confirmation that they would help. Just coordinates, a time and a warning. The Coalition scrambled to comply. The Andera expanse was a major shipping route, home to mining stations and colonies. Evacuating it in 48 hours seemed impossible, but somehow they managed it. Millions of civilians were moved. Hundreds of stations were abandoned. Every ship in the region was ordered to retreat to a safe distance. Vareth found herself assigned to one of the observation vessels that would witness whatever was about to happen. She stood on the bridge of the Coalition science ship Wanderer, surrounded by delegates and military officers from a dozen species. They had positioned themselves at the very edge of the safe zone, far enough to avoid whatever the humans had planned, but close enough to observe. The Krenathi were coming. Long-range sensors showed their swarm approaching the Andera expanse, a living mass of ships and organisms filling space like a cloud of locusts. They numbered in the millions, perhaps tens of millions. They had detected the evacuation and were moving faster, sensing an opportunity to claim more resources. The time stamp approached. Vareth watched the chronometer count down, her heart's beating in an irregular rhythm. Around her, the bridge was silent. Everyone was watching the empty space at the designated coordinates, waiting to see if the humans would actually appear. The chronometer reached 0. For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality itself seemed to ripple. There was no flash of hyperspace emergence, no dramatic visual display. One moment the space was empty. The next moment, a fleet was simply there, as if it had always been there and the universe had only just noticed. Varetha's breath caught in her throat. The human fleet hung in the void, and even from this distance she could tell that something was different about these ships. They were sleek and dark, their surfaces seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with a precision that seemed impossible, every vessel in perfect formation. And there were so many of them. Thousands of ships, ranging from small frigates to massive vessels that dwarfed anything in the Coalition fleet. A communication channel opened. A human voice spoke in perfect galactic common, calm and without emotion. "This is Admiral Marcus Chin of the Human Defense Fleet. We have received your request for assistance. The Krenathi swarm is approaching your position. We will handle this. Remain at your current distance and do not interfere." Then the channel closed. The human fleet began to move, accelerating toward the approaching swarm with impossible speed. Vareth realized she was gripping the edge of her console hard enough that her claws were leaving marks in the metal. Around her, every being on the bridge was frozen, watching the display. The Krenathi swarm had detected the human fleet. The swarm changed formation, preparing to envelop and consume these new opponents just as it had consumed every other fleet that had faced it. Millions of bioships began to spread out, creating a net of living matter that would surround and digest everything it touched. The human fleet did not slow down. They drove straight toward the center of the swarm like a spear aimed at a heart. Vareth wanted to scream at them to stop, to pull back, that they did not understand what they were facing. But she remained silent, watching as the two forces met in the darkness between stars. What happened next would haunt her for the rest of her life. The arrival and erasure. The human fleet met the Krenathi swarm in the dead space of the Andera expanse, and for exactly 3 seconds nothing happened. The bioships of the Krenathi surrounded the human vessels in a living sphere of pulsing organic matter. Vareth had seen this tactic before. It was how the swarm consumed everything. They would attach themselves to the hull of enemy ships, burning through armor with biological acids, flooding corridors with parasitic organisms, converting crew and vessel alike into raw material for the collective. Commander Vareth watched the sensor displays, waiting for the inevitable. The Krenathi mass was overwhelming. Even if each human ship was somehow superior to anything the Coalition could build, the numbers were impossible. The swarm had perhaps 20 million bioships in this engagement alone. The humans had brought maybe 5,000 vessels. The mathematics of warfare were brutal and simple. They were going to die. Except they did not die. The sensor officer aboard the Wanderer made a sound that Vareth had never heard from his species before, something between a gasp and a whimper. "The readings are impossible," he said, his tentacles trembling as they worked the controls. "I must be interpreting the data incorrectly. The energy signatures do not make sense. What do you see?" Elder Morn demanded from his position near the viewport. His ancient eyes were fixed on the distant battle, trying to comprehend what his instruments were telling him. "The human ships are generating fields I cannot classify," the sensor officer replied. "They are not shields as we understand them. They are something else. Something that affects space itself. The Krenathi bioships are not breaking through. They are not even making contact." Vareth enhanced the visual display, zooming in on the human fleet. What she saw defied everything she understood about physics and warfare. The human vessels were surrounded by what appeared to be distortions in reality itself. The space around each ship rippled like water, and where the Krenathi bioships touched those ripples, they simply stopped existing. Not destroyed. Not exploded or burned. They just ceased to be, as if they had been edited out of the universe. The Krenathi swarm reacted with the collective intelligence that made it so dangerous. It had faced conventional weapons before and had adapted. It had encountered energy shields and had learned to penetrate them. But this was different. The swarm pulled back slightly, reorganizing, attempting to understand this new threat. Billions of organisms across millions of ships processed information, shared experiences, calculated possibilities. Then the human fleet attacked. Vareth would later struggle to describe what she witnessed in those next 47 seconds. The human ships moved in perfect synchronization, their dark hulls flowing through space like liquid shadow. From each vessel, beams of something erupted outward. They were not lasers or plasma weapons. They did not travel like conventional ordnance. They appeared to be tears in space itself, jagged lines of absolute darkness that spread through the Krenathi formation like cracks spreading through ice. Where those lines touched the bioships, reality unraveled. The Krenathi vessels did not explode or burn. They folded inward on themselves, collapsing into points of impossible density before vanishing completely. There was no debris. No wreckage floating in the void. The ships simply stopped existing along with everything they contained. The Krenathi swarm tried to adapt. It was the swarm's greatest strength, the ability to learn and change in response to threats. Bioships began altering their molecular structure, attempting to phase shift to avoid the human weapons. Others released clouds of organic matter, hoping to absorb or deflect the attacks. The collective intelligence that drove the swarm was processing millions of tactical variations, searching desperately for a solution. It found none. The human fleet moved through the swarm like a blade through smoke. Their weapons fired in precise patterns, each beam carefully calculated to maximize the erasure. The Krenathi tried to flee, billions of organisms suddenly experiencing something they had never known before. Fear. The bioships that turned to run found themselves caught by the human vessels, which moved faster than anything their size should be able to move. Physics seemed to bend around the human fleet, allowing them to accelerate and maneuver in ways that coalition scientists would later argue were theoretically impossible. Vareth watched the tactical display as the red markers representing Krenathi bioships began to disappear. Not slowly. Not gradually. They vanished by the thousands, then by the tens of thousands. The swarm that had consumed 17 coalition systems, that had destroyed the mighty Torvalian Armada, that had seemed unstoppable, was being erased from existence. 47 seconds after the human attack began, it was over. The Andera expanse was empty. The Krenathi swarm was gone. Not a single bioship remained. Not a single organism survived. 20 million living vessels and the billions of individual creatures they contained had been removed from the universe as cleanly as deleting text from a document. The space where they had been was pristine, unmarked by battle. There was no debris field, no expanding clouds of organic matter, no heat signatures or radiation. Just emptiness and silence. The human fleet hung motionless in the void, their dark ships reflecting no light. On the bridge of the Wanderer nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They were all trying to process what they had just witnessed, trying to reconcile it with everything they understood about warfare and physics and the nature of reality itself. The communication channel opened again. Admiral Chen's voice was the same as before, calm and professional, as if he had just completed a routine patrol rather than erasing an extinction-level threat from existence. The Krenathi presence in this sector has been eliminated. We are detecting no remaining biosignatures. The threat to your immediate territory is neutralized. Elder Morn found his voice first, though it trembled with emotions Vareth could not identify. Admiral Chen, what did we just witness? What kind of weapons are those? There was a pause before the human responded. When the Coalition quarantined our space 150 years ago, we understood the message. We were too dangerous to be allowed among you. We were a threat that needed to be contained. So we accepted the isolation and we used that time to prepare. Prepare for what? Vareth heard herself ask, her voice barely above a whisper. For the day when something would come that you could not stop, Chen replied. We knew it would happen eventually. The galaxy is vast and filled with dangers. We knew that someday something would emerge that would threaten all sentient life, and we knew that when that day came you would need us. The display showed the human fleet beginning to move, their ships gliding away from the empty battlefield. But Chen continued speaking, and his words carried a weight that made Vareth's scales prickle with instinctive unease. What you witnessed today was not our full capability. The weapons we used here are defensive in nature, designed to eliminate threats with minimal collateral damage. We held back significantly to avoid destabilizing local spacetime. The Krenathi are not destroyed, Ambassador. They have been removed from this dimensional frequency. They still exist in a manner of speaking, but they exist elsewhere now. Somewhere they can never return from. Somewhere they can never harm anyone again. Ambassador Kelric, the Ven who had first suggested contacting humanity, asked the question that Vareth suspected everyone was thinking. How far does your capability extend, Admiral? What else can you do? Chen's response was measured, but Vareth could hear something underneath the calm professional tone. Something that might have been sadness or perhaps regret. During our isolation, we discovered something that the rest of the galaxy has not yet learned. Consciousness itself affects the fabric of reality. Sentient thought, when properly focused and amplified, can alter the fundamental laws of physics. We learned to harness this. We built technology that bridges the gap between mind and matter. Our ships are not just machines, Ambassador. They are extensions of human will, powered by human consciousness, limited only by human imagination and human morality. The implications of those words settled over the bridge like a heavy blanket. Vareth understood what Chen was really saying. The humans had not just developed advanced weapons. They had fundamentally altered their relationship with reality itself. They had become something more than a typical spacefaring species. They had become something the galaxy had no framework to understand. Elder Morn asked the question that would define the galaxy's relationship with humanity for generations to come. Why did you hold back? If you possess such power, why did you accept quarantine? Why did you hide? This time, the pause before Chen answered was longer. When he spoke, his voice carried a weariness that suggested he had asked himself the same question many times. Because power without restraint is tyranny, Elder. We hold back because we choose to. We accepted quarantine because we understood your fear. We hid because we did not want to become the very threat we were preparing to defend against. The human fleet was almost at the edge of sensor range now, preparing to depart the same way they had arrived, simply vanishing from reality as if they had never been there at all. But Chen had one final message. The Krenathi threat extended beyond this sector. Our sensors detected 17 hive clusters in nearby regions. We will address those as well. Within one standard galactic week, the Krenathi will be completely removed from this dimensional plane. Your species will be safe. The quarantine around human space will remain in effect. We ask that you respect it as we have always respected your sovereignty. We will be watching as we have always been watching. If another threat emerges that you cannot handle, send word. We will come. The channel closed. The human fleet shimmered and was gone, leaving nothing but empty space and 1,000 unanswered questions. Vareth stood in the silence of the bridge, her mind racing to comprehend what had happened. The Krenathi, the unstoppable swarm that had consumed worlds and destroyed fleets, had been erased in less than a minute. Humanity had done what the entire coalition could not do, and they had made it look effortless. More than that, they had revealed that they were holding back, that what the galaxy had just witnessed was them being gentle. What happened to Thros? She asked quietly. The Mekler warlord who attacked the human colony 150 years ago. What did you really do to him and his fleet? Elder Morn turned to look at her, his ancient eyes filled with a new understanding. They did exactly what they did to the Krenathi. They removed him from existence. Cleanly. Completely. Without a trace. That is why no wreckage was ever found. That is why there were no bodies, no debris, no evidence. The humans made it so that Thros and his warriors never were. The sensor officer was reviewing the battle data, his tentacles moving frantically over the controls. I am detecting residual energy signatures in the space where the Krenathi were eliminated. They are fading rapidly, but I can analyze them before they dissipate completely. He worked in silence for several minutes, then stopped. His entire body went still. These signatures are similar to patterns we detect in quantum foam at the subatomic level. The humans were not using conventional weapons at all. They were manipulating the underlying structure of spacetime itself. They were reaching into the quantum foundation of reality and editing it. Ambassador Kelric moved to the viewport, staring out at the empty space where two vast fleets had met and where one had simply ceased to exist. We asked for their help, he said softly. We begged them to save us from extinction. And they did. But in doing so, they have shown us something terrifying. They have shown us that the stories were not exaggerated. If anything, they were understated. Humanity is not just more advanced than us. They have transcended the normal boundaries of what a species can achieve. Vareth felt a chill run through her body. She thought of her homeworld, consumed by the Krenathi. She thought of the billions who had died. And now she thought of humanity sitting quietly in their quarantine space, possessing power that could erase civilizations with a thought, choosing not to use it unless absolutely necessary. The question is, Elder Morn said slowly, are we safer now, or have we simply traded one existential threat for another? Nobody answered because there was no good answer. The Krenathi were gone, removed from existence by beings who could manipulate reality itself. The galaxy was saved, but at the cost of a terrible new knowledge. Humanity was not hiding because they were afraid. They were hiding because they were dangerous beyond measure, and they knew it. Vareth accessed the communication logs, reviewing Chen's final words. Within 1 week, the Krenathi will be completely removed. She pulled up star charts showing the 17 hive clusters he had mentioned. They were spread across thousands of light years. To eliminate them all in 1 week would require capabilities that defied every understanding of physics and warfare. And yet, she believed Chen completely. She had watched what humans could do when they chose to act. She had no doubt they would do exactly what they had promised. A junior officer approached Elder Morn hesitantly. "Sir, what do we tell the coalition? How do we report what happened here?" "Tell them the truth," Morn replied. "Tell them that humanity answered our call. Tell them the threat is eliminated. And tell them that the quarantine around human space is more important now than it ever was. Not to protect us from them, but to protect them from our fear and our stupidity. The humans chose isolation to avoid becoming monsters. We need to respect that choice because the alternative is unthinkable." Vareth turned away from the displays and the sensor readings. She looked out at the stars, at the vast expanse of the galaxy that had just been saved by beings who chose restraint over domination. She thought about the irony of it all. The species the galaxy had feared and quarantined were the only ones capable of saving them when true horror arrived. And somewhere out there, beyond the quarantine zone, humanity waited in silence. Not threatening. Not demanding. Just watching. Just ready. Always ready. The Wanderer began its journey back to Coalition space, carrying news of salvation and a warning. The Krenathi were gone. The galaxy was safe. But everyone now understood the truth that had been hidden for a century and a half. Humanity had not been locked away for the galaxy's protection. They had locked themselves away for their own protection so they would not become the very thing they were capable of destroying. And that restraint, that choice to limit themselves despite possessing unlimited power, was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. Because it meant that if humanity ever decided to stop holding back, if they ever chose to unleash their full capability without restraint, there was nothing in the known universe that could stop them. The Krenathi had learned that lesson in 47 seconds. The rest of the galaxy would spend the next 1,000 years praying they never had to learn it at all. Deep in human space, Admiral Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship Prometheus, watching the display as his fleet systematically eliminated the remaining Krenathi hive clusters exactly as promised. Around him, officers worked in quiet efficiency, their minds linked to the ship's systems through neural interfaces that made vessel and crew into a single unified entity. Chen thought about the coalition, about the fear he had heard in Elder Morn's voice, about the weight of responsibility that came with the power humanity had claimed. They had chosen isolation not out of fear but out of wisdom. They had understood what they were becoming and had made the conscious choice to withdraw rather than dominate. But they had also understood that isolation was temporary. That someday, inevitably, something would come that would require them to act. The Krenathi had been that something. And humanity had responded exactly as they had always known they would. Decisively. Completely. Permanently. The last Krenathi hive cluster vanished from the display, removed from reality with the same clinical precision as all the others. Chin closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of billions of lives erased. Not killed. Not destroyed. Simply made to have never been. It was a power that no species should possess, and humanity wielded it with terrible care. A communication came through from Fleet Command. "Admiral, all objectives complete. The Krenathi have been eliminated from this dimensional frequency. Total casualties to Coalition forces during our operations: 0. Total collateral damage: 0. The galaxy is secure." Chin acknowledged the report and gave the order he had been waiting to give since this operation began. "All units return to base. Resume standard defensive positions. Re-establish quarantine protocols. We are done here." As the human fleet prepared to vanish back into their hidden space, Chin sent one final transmission to the Coalition, knowing it would be received but probably never answered. "This is Admiral Chin. We keep our promises. We hope never to hear from you again, not because we do not care, but because we hope you never face another threat that requires our intervention. Live well. Build wisely. And remember that power is not about what you can do, but about what you choose not to do." The transmission ended. The fleet shimmered and was gone, leaving the galaxy to its salvation and its nightmares, wondering forever about the beings who had saved them and what other horrors they might be capable of if they ever stopped choosing mercy.